On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
People are searching for meaning in their life, and 1/3 of their life is their work, and generally.
Yeah.
If you are contributing as a leader in a company to helping people see meaning in their life and in their work,
right,
you are making a major contribution, and you're going to make more money.
Yeah.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe. I'm your host of Gathering the Kings, the podcast where we bring kings to you like today. Robert White on the king stage. My friend, how are you?
I'm well and delighted to be with you, Chaz.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're delighted because, man, we get to do some cool stuff here today and deliver some hopefully some nuggets to some people listening and who are hungry. They want to grow and change, and I know that's what we're both about. So anxious to dive in. But before we do that, Robert, tell us what kind of business that you have.
Well, I've spent most of my life founding and leading 3 training companies that do high-impact experiential learning for executives. And today I work with executives directly as a mentor, and a coach, as a business advisor.
Love that. Well, we're going to be able to pull all the nuggets from you today. We're going to get them all in one podcast now. I'm going to sure try. But in all seriousness, for the listener, I want you guys to pay close attention. Decades of experience and coaching coming at you here in a hot second. So before we dive into your history and maybe some nuggets that you can give to the listener, Robert, I want to know why. Like, even at this stage in the game, you've had success, years, decades of success. You don't have to do any of this. You don't have to be here today. Why?
Well, I had this incredible experience in my late 20s of one of the early human potential movement trainings. It sounds like a cliche all these years later, but it changed my life for the better. So part of it is that I've operated for years, and there are now 1,300,000 graduates of these programs from companies that I founded and led. But what has fueled that for me, first of all, was my own personal experience of going from struggle and guilt and shame and a whole bunch of negative self-talk into living in a 15,000 square foot house on 76 acres in Aspen. And having my own jet, and all of those symbols of success.
Yeah,
I like sharing that. I really enjoy it. I know there are people that yearn for the beach or something like that. It's just not me. I love being with people, with the executives that I work with. I love sharing their struggles and their wins. I love all of that. It just invigorates me. And also I've got a little personal project I'm working on in terms of a trust that I'm funding. So there are a bunch of reasons for doing it. All of them are good. Yeah, I mean, along with all the frustrations of running a business and working with clients and all that. Overall, it's just it's life affirming for me.
Yeah, I think that's just so good because I mean, there's, like you said, you had this revelation when you were in your 20s. You're obviously not in your 20s now, but there's these moments that we have of like re-upping, like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. And so it gives you a new perspective, a fueling of sorts, to dive back in again and to kind of re-sign back up to the greater purpose. And maybe we have a clearer vision of what the greater purpose is. And so it's just, for me at least, it's really encouraging to know someone with at your level, with the history that you've had, to be able to still feel that, because selfishly building a business, doing all those things that you just talked about, even the goods, the bads, the struggles, even doing it inside of our mastermind group, sharing those things with other entrepreneurs, it really fuels me. And so to know that I still have decades to go and I can still be fueled by that. That sounds pretty exciting to me. A little selfish because I like the dopamine hit, I guess. I don't know. What would you say to that?
Something like that. When I was mostly retired at 46 and I moved to Aspen from Asia, and and I had wonderful friendships and skied 80 days a year and flew around in my own plane and stuff like that. It was wonderful. I remarried and had 4 wonderful children, 2 birth children, 2 adopted children, and everything was just wonderful. And I started waking up, and that's way beyond anything I ever dreamed of growing up in poverty and on the wrong side of the tracks in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I never imagined a life like that, and I'm living it. And I started waking up with this nagging thought that God was not done with me yet, that there was something that I was supposed to be contributing and I hadn't contributed it. And I tried to push it away, frankly. In talking with people about faith, it's interesting the number of people that are like me. They don't, when God speaks or indicates things, or however you want to say that, that we avoid it and push it away. And that's what I did for a long time. And then, I kind of woke up one morning and went, oh, okay. I get it.
Yeah.
There's some things here I need to do.
Exactly. And I would parlay that right into, isn't that how we deal with most things, whether it's, like you said, God talking to us about something spiritual in our life, or whether it's something that we know we need to do in our family or in our business. We know what we need to do. We know that it's time to level up. It's probably why the listener is listening right now. Or, like you said, someone who hires an executive coach or joins a mastermind group like Gathering the Kings. Like before that action, they knew. Yes. They just hadn't taken the action yet, which is the same exact thing that you're talking about, even on a spiritual level. It's like, that you should change or grow or mature or return back to your faith or whatever that inkling is. We know it, but we just fight it for a while and then a while longer. And sometimes our frustrations climb up to a certain level, or maybe we just get a clear vision, or we see someone else, have something maybe that we don't, or whatever happens. It's just that moment we're like, I've known that I should do this, but now I'm actually going to do it. Would you share anything with that?
Well, our former president, Bill Clinton, in my lifetime, probably the best politician. Recently politicians have such a bad rap that we forget that it is a profession. And I think as a profession, he was probably as good at it or better than most. I don't share his politics, but I admire what he was able to get done as a professional. And what he was famous for was called compartmentalizing, that he could take certain things and just put them away in his consciousness and go after what he was going after. And at the time that I heard it, I thought, well, that's terrible. You should be a principled person. But then, in working on myself and with myself, and then with clients, I did this informally. I guess I was a mentor, an unpaid one, for many years with friends and acquaintances and our graduates. And I enjoyed it, but doing it professionally is different. And what I realized in doing it professionally is that many of my clients come to me with a severe case of compartmentalizing. They've taken blame, shame, regret, guilt, and even past success and pushed it aside.
Right.
And in many ways, it's a positive quality because they're so driven and they're smart and they're focused and they're aligned and they're committed. So they push that stuff away. But that doesn't mean that it went away. That those events from the past are kind of in you, bubbling along in the background, or if using the computer metaphor, as part of your operating system.
Yeah.
And then you start wondering, why didn't I pursue that opportunity that was in front of me and now it's too late? Why did I get rid of that guy, that woman, when actually they were really performing well? and something just drove me to get to somehow see the negative in all of that. What are these patterns that show up all of the time? Where do they come from? Well, it's actually known where they come from. They come from your past, from your belief system, even from childhood. And so that journey for me turns out to be something that a lot of my executive clients, entrepreneurial clients identify with. They get it when you start talking about what keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
Those kinds of conversations. What's the pattern that you repeat that doesn't work for you? That kind of question.
Yeah. Those are pretty powerful. They're things that we hear sometimes, whether it be in a book or on a podcast like this, and we shake our head. We go, "Ooh, that's good, Robert. Yeah." And then there it goes.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement to the listener right now is just to pause for a second, take these two simple questions that he just proposed, and you just think about it. Actually think about what these loops are that you have and why you have them, if they're destructive of any kind, and think about maybe where they come from and how you can adjust and grow and mature past that. Because you're right, having 45 windows open on my screen usually slows it down eventually. Right?
Good metaphor.
I think every entrepreneur can relate. If I opened up just about anybody listening right now, if I open up their computer, I guarantee you, I'm going to go ahead and count real quick. 1, 2, 3. It's at least 25 on that one. And I got another 4 screens. It's like, geez, how can you even do all this? But okay. So Robert, let's go practical a little bit here. Let's go. I'll give you a couple different ways you can answer this. Of course, you could answer it through some of your clients and how you've seen them. I'd really like to hear maybe from your personal experience, but either way would be fine. Early on in a business, like ideally pre-big team and millions in revenue, that's where the listener is right now. What decision did you make that was such a good decision, or a client decision that you've seen over and over and over again that is it's repeatable? We should go do it. We should stop everything. We should take note of it. We should replicate it. What's that?
Well, it comes out of a failure, and I've shared with people close to me that it was the most valuable failure that I could ever imagined. And of course, I didn't want it, and I hated it, and I was embarrassed by it, and all of that. So part of my history is I worked for someone else for 4 years. That company that sponsored that original training that was so good for me, they ended up hiring me as their president. And so I ran that company for 4 years. And the founder was the idea guy, the vision for the whole idea. And I just ran the business most of the time.
Yeah.
And the ownership changed. One of the owners died, and everything went upside down. And I ended up reporting to a probate judge. And if any of you ever have that opportunity, I highly recommend you pass on it.
Sounds complicated.
It was horrible. I went from working for a visionary leader to working for a probate judge, and I don't recommend that. So I quit, and I started a company called LifeSpring. Now, LifeSpring went on to have 17 training centers in the United States and over 500,000 graduates. So it turned out to be a huge success, but it did that without me. 6 months into the founding of the company, we were active in 3 cities, Chicago, Portland, and San Francisco. And I couldn't stand the thought of going to work in the morning. And it was my company. I owned it. And so I later looked at what it was that was true, and that informed my later success. And it was this: I didn't have these terms at the time, but I lived the experience, and that's purpose, vision, and values. And I believe that's the foundation of any company, small, medium, or large. That you need to know your purpose, why you exist. What is it that's unique about what you do in terms of what you're providing? And then secondly, that you've got a huge vision, not a big goal. I'm talking a big vision of the difference that you're going to make on the planet, and that probably is not going to be realized during your lifetime, that it's that big. and also that you are operating from life-affirming positive values, and they're not just on the coffee cup or on the wall. You're living them.
Right.
You and everybody in the organization. I didn't know that, but I was the beneficiary of it when I was president of Mind Dynamics, that company.
Right.
Alexander provided all of that in his very being, plus his actions. And I just didn't get it. I didn't get I've lived and worked in Asia for 23 years of my working life. And so a lot of those Asian sayings kind of wander around in my mind. And one of them is from Zen Buddhism, that fish do not describe water very well. That whatever we're living in, we don't see it, that famous in the 60s, the great essay, What is Air? We don't notice a lot. Right. And that's what I didn't notice. So I got into starting my own company, LifeSpring, and I assumed that all of the early people that I attracted were aligned to me and with me in terms of purpose, vision, and values, even though I didn't know those terms, even though I didn't understand the power of that idea. And so the company was fractured from day two, the moment I hired one person, because I couldn't express the purpose, vision, and values. I had been the beneficiary of somebody that lived it.
Right.
But who also didn't express it. So today, when I work with organizations, that's the basis of my work. How clear is everybody in this company around their purpose, vision, and values, and their strategic intent? I added that fourth quality. And because ultimately, if you look at what the leader's job is, whether it's a 3-person company or a 30 or 300, or in my case, around 300 people, it's focus, alignment, and commitment. If those three things aren't present in terms of your results, things are going to get not good really fast.
Yeah.
People need to be focused, aligned, and committed. Then, of course, the question is, what are you focused on? What are you aligned to? And what are you committed to? And that goes back to the original three: purpose, vision, and values, and your strategic intent. So all of that is just theory. But in practice, what it adds up to is today, people are, whether we like it or not, you can have a long philosophical discussion on this, people are searching for meaning in their life, and 1/3 of their life is their work, and generally.
Yeah.
If you are contributing as a leader in a company to helping people see meaning in their life and in their work, you are making a major contribution, and you're going to make more money.
Yeah. Wow. I couldn't agree more, and I normally have something to say, but I think you led us right to the place of pretty clarity, or having clarity around those things. I want to explore, not for the sake of exploiting your failure, but kind of, because you were vulnerable with that. Since you didn't have those, why did that lead to someone else taking it and doing all those incredible things without you?
Well, it showed up on the surface as a power struggle, among the early people that I attracted into the company, and that's no fun. And people that you had worked with had, the primary person being my vice president at Mind Dynamics became my vice president at LifeSpring, and it was a big change that I didn't recognize, and so the power struggle part, and also I experienced it as a failure. I had put all the money that I had into LifeSpring. I was the only funder. And I sold it to the staff for no money down and forever to pay. So things became vivid very quickly, in that I have no money, no job. I've got a wife, a family, a mortgage, all the standard stuff. And all of that, you can experience that as an opportunity, and all motivational speakers often talk like that. But I experienced that as a crushing burden, as a failure. Yeah. So that learning about what actually happened came later for me. it came through whether you call it meditation or prayer or being quiet, and really looking at how I sourced it. It wasn't somebody else that did it to me. There was something missing in my leadership that created that, and that's not an easy thing for the male ego. You notice how quickly I third-partied that.
That's right.
But it was not easy for me. It was very painful. And also the fact that it was somewhat public in our industry, that was particularly, my friend Charlie Kiefer and Lynn Schlesinger, they wrote this wonderful book about entrepreneurship called Just Start. And it's actually the book I recommend if somebody's going to be an entrepreneur, other than my book.
Of course.
My book is more personal and his is more organizational. And it's absolutely great. But, Charlie was, he's a very bright guy. He's got a master's from MIT in physics. He's just way smart. But he also was an entrepreneur and a very successful one. And when it got right down to it, and and Len Schlesinger was a full professor at Harvard Business School, and then chief operating officer of the Limited with 2,000 something stores.
Right.
I mean, these are two superstars, and they wrote a book where the title is Just Start.
Yeah, no, it's so true though.
And for me to just start again, that's where the mystery comes in for me, or I think for any entrepreneur, and why we do what we do is there wasn't any question. I was offered a big time job. There was a company called EST at that time in our industry, and the biggest company in our industry, and it's now called Landmark. So I was offered the CEO job, and I did work for them for 1 month as a consultant just to check it out. And but it was just so clear to me that even with the failure, that I really wanted to be on my own. I really wanted to be my own boss. Even with Mind Dynamics, it was like being my own boss, because Alexandra gave me so much space to operate. And where that kind of drive comes from, I don't know. But if you've got it, if you've got that disease, then you best prepare yourself, right? And your background is, I don't know, how many companies have you been involved in?
Yeah, numerous, and probably too many. I'm now learning that I should have done less. Probably do more with less is the story now. But
right,
you've given us quite the picture here, Robert. I mean, obviously, the hindsight that you later discovered of purpose and vision and having these things in place, even as a small company, you're right, is so important. And we get busy, right? Like we get busy trying to get a client. We get busy trying to execute the project as a trades guy. Get busy, building the website or whatever I'm doing. I get busy on the finance side, trying to make sure I'm keeping track of all the numbers. And if we do that too long, you would probably encourage them to do it day one. I would say, look, sometime in the first year at least, gather some time. It's tough to do it, and maybe you could speak to this a little bit because you've got quite a bit of experience, but it's tough to do it at the beginning because there's a lot of analysis paralysis, a lot of thinking before action. So I'm a huge action-taking fan. And then when you have a little bit of a mess, okay, let's come back to the table and clean up a few things, add some direction and some vision here. But then you gave us the I guess the caveat to that, which is, okay, really what that failure gave to you is this super clear vision of who you are, what you want, what you desire, and so how my question to you, my follow-up question is, how does the listener find that in them now without having to go through this huge thing and then years later discovering it through prayer like you did?
Well, the most commented line from my book when I first introduced it, you send it, the PR company sends it out to all these media people, and then somebody reads it, usually not the interviewer, some grunt, Some hapless intern reads it, and they come up with 5 questions. I mean, that's the routine. By the way, one of them is always snarky. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, just know you're going to
Be prepared for the snark. I got
be
it.
Be ready for the snark. But the most commented on line from the book was, life is simple. This does not mean it's easy.
Yeah.
Life is simple. This does not mean it's easy. Many, many people have that 180 degrees apart from reality. People want life to be complicated and easy. Once I figure it'll be easy. But the great teachers for thousands of years, Buddha said all life is suffering. The existential philosophers say that life is hard and then you die. I've been following Jordan Peterson recently, the psychology professor from Canada. He says life is tragic, and our job is to figure out how to navigate through the tragedy. Great teachers have always said that. And, I spent 2015 through 2020 in China, and I was in front of over 100,000 people and worked closely with 20,000, in a 4 or 5 day training format.
Yeah.
And I noticed I don't do scripts. And I have a general outline of what I'm going to talk about, but I don't script it. And I just noticed myself quoting 2 people that I really didn't want to quote. One was my former wife, who broke my heart and put me through hell and all of that kind of stuff. But she had a lot of wisdom, and I noticed myself occasionally quoting her because she had this ability to capture a complex thought in a simple sentence.
Yeah.
And but the other person I found myself quoting was the late and I'd say revered Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits book.
Yeah.
And that kind of speaks to how you kind of started this subject, which is, he said he made the distinction between important and urgent.
Yeah.
And that part of his book, I just think is so powerful. It was so good for me when I first read it, and I see it with my clients also, that we get caught up in the urgent, in the problem, in the customer that's complaining, or the product that got mismanufactured or didn't get inspected, or all of that kind of stuff, or the key person grumbling and thinking he might want to quit. All of this stuff that flies at us every day. It's the urgent. And what we don't pay attention to is the important. And I like how you language this, that that you get into business, you just start, you scramble, you get a few clients, things start moving. At some point, what's needed desperately is to sit down with yourself and or your team. And it can be in either direction, by the way.
Yep. Yeah.
And to take a deep dive into purpose, vision, and values. Why are we here? What do we stand for? And, one of the most interesting books I've read in the last 20 years was the Steve Jobs book. And I found myself falling in love with this guy and then hating him within the same, within the same 3 minutes.
Yeah.
He was such a jerk with people and
right.
all of that. And yet a level of brilliance and entrepreneurial whatever.
Yeah.
That is incredible, Well, there's a video on YouTube. He left Apple. He was in effect fired from his own company, something I can identify with. And he started this company called Next, N-E-X-T, and which was also a failure, by the way, and in many ways, except that the architecture of Next is the architecture of Apple today, in technical terms, I understand.
Yeah.
And but there's a meeting that he held about a year into Next at some ski resort in Northern California. And it's very informal, and the video is kind of choppy and, like kind of amateurish in a way. But people are sitting around on the floor on cushions. It's very Californian, I guess, in a way.
Yep. Very Steve Jobs.
And I highly recommend that to entrepreneurs if you want to be a little bit thoughtful, if you want to look at somebody that won big as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and the struggles he went through, but also his quality of leadership, because his leadership of that group is as good as, I'm a reasonably good facilitator. I mean, we over 1 million graduates, and I know something about that.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was as good as I am, and frankly, that wasn't his profession.
Right.
But he was one hell of a leader, and the way he interacted with his team, because it was this entire company in that living room,
Right.
of that, probably an Airbnb that they rented.
Sure. Exactly.
So what you see there is he's looking at, who are we? What are we really up to here? What is it that's going to power us forward? And with these radical ideas, and that, he always had a radical idea or two,
right.
or three or four.
Exactly.
So I think that's the key, is that at some point, and then, there are great books, there are videos, there are mentors, coaches, as ways to accelerate it. And another way to say it, you don't have to fail.
Right.
You can head that off. You can get some help.
Yeah.
My biggest, you talk about your mastermind. I'd say that if I had it to do all over again, I would have joined a mastermind.
Yeah.
But I was the lone wolf always.
Yep. Right.
And that was a huge mistake on my part. You can't do those things over. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. But my way would have been smooth if I would have had some friends who were, my term that I now use, committed listeners.
Yeah.
They know what I'm up to, and they'll call me out when I'm off track.
Yeah.
That kind of, and I think that a good mastermind does that.
Yeah.
You said you stand for this, this, and this, but you're doing this, this, and this. Hey, buddy.
Right. Yeah.
Sort that out.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's tough love. What on this topic, I just have this, because you've seen, it's not only just such great success with you, and we talked about ego earlier, but now you're leading executives who have success and also have ego. We all do. And so I guess my question to you around this mastermind thought is, or at least what I've seen, is that the people who get the most value from a coach or a mastermind, but specifically thinking mastermind because it's this peer table, is the people who let go of the ego, and they're willing to learn from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different people of different varying degrees of industry or success. And so this place that you're talking about being able to get to, how would you suggest that the listener do that? Whether they join Gathering the Kings or some other group, it doesn't matter to me. Them getting to the next level is what this podcast is about. That's why you and I are both here today. And so if you're going back and you're telling Robert to join a mastermind group, inside of that, what's the strategy? Or what is his mindset? What's the action plan that he takes other than just joining?
Well, I hate this next moment because I'll quote my former wife. The answer is awareness. And she languages that slightly differently, and I like it a lot. She calls it a higher state of noticing. Because what happens with the ego is we come up with an image of who we are.
Okay.
And we come up with a belief system about the way the world is and about how we operate in it.
Right.
And quite often that has no connection to reality. So what you need, it's the purpose of that book or that mastermind or that video or of going to some training.
Right.
And that is to develop a higher state of noticing of yourself, of other people, and of the world that you live in. Look, we had in my last company in Asia, 70 full-time trainers. And these are people that, it took anywhere from 1 to 2 years to train them to get up in front of 300 people and confront 300 people.
Right.
So people would say, well, how do you select your trainers? They're all these superstars. How do you evaluate them? And so I had to think about that. Mostly we did it by intuition and if somebody loved the training and seemed to want to do it, we'd hire them and see if it worked out. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't, frankly.
Right.
And I started noticing we were spending a lot of money on training trainers that never made it.
Yeah.
So it would behoove us to figure out what are the qualities to look for in advance. Yeah. And I came up with two. One was empathy, that people had an ability to get their ego out of the way and just be with other people and see them. Yeah. But the other one sounds like the exact opposite, and psychologically, in many ways it is. They needed to have a strong ego, a strong sense of who they were, because particularly in our kind of work where we're confronting people and pointing out, that your baby is ugly kind of stuff. So to do that, you have to have a strong ego. You can't run away from it.
Yeah.
And so there's a zillion examples of people like that. We know people that have figured out who they are, what they stand for, and they're unshakable.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is ego becomes like an enemy in pop culture. Well, he has a big ego. Well, if I'm gonna do anything in life, I better have a big ego. Yeah. But I better be aware of what it is, about how I hold myself, how I'm selling myself, in effect, and to have control of it. And the classic one-liner: does your ego? Do you own your ego, or does it own you? Yeah. If it owns you, you'll get in trouble. You'll screw up. You'll want to look good in a certain situation, and it'll all blow up on you. But if you own it, if you know who you are, and you own that, you take personal responsibility for how that ego shows up in the world. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, this whole conversation, we could do a whole podcast just on this, but just to reiterate for the listener here, because I mean their head is swirling right now with just phenomenal information. I want to just bullet point and summarize the ego piece specifically, because you're right, they're opposites, but they fulfill one another. In my opinion, the ego is only healthy if you can put it aside and be with other people. And so in order to have a healthy, productive ego that's going to drive me, I have to have the heightened level of self-noticing so that I can see other people. And I would say, looking back on my history, very, very specifically, thinking ego and ambition and the moment, thank goodness for me, it was when I was younger. Then, some people it's when they're older. But this transition, we call it this warrior to king transition, but this mindset shift where it's not just about me. It can't be, because it only drives me so much. And very quickly, it has to be around, the person that I'm sitting with right now today, the children and the wife I was telling you about that I got a quick break with right before this podcast. The clients that we go back and forth with on different things that are having to do business related, or just because I'm just checking in and seeing how you doing, brother. Or so many other examples, right, of just being in that space, present. But at the same time, having that confidence in who you are, which is identity and confidence to know that, like, this is who I am, this is who I'm made for. And so we use some of the same language. I'm curious, maybe after the show here, for us to digress on some of this and talk about it, because the warrior to king transition is this. The warrior is selfish. He has to fight for the battle. He's in survival mode. He can only look out to the left and the right, maybe, and that's okay. There's a period of time in life and business where you have to do that.
Yes.
But man, what you're designed for, the king mindset, it's you, your family, your community, your church, the people around you, the team that you have, the families of your team, like all these people that are counting on you. And eventually, when you make that shift as an entrepreneur, and this is my hope for the listener, that when you make that shift, it all becomes so radically clear, but yet so big. It's confusing and a little overwhelming, but it becomes clear of, well, I got to get going. There's so much more to do. I'm designed for so much more. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm blown away. Frankly, that's not only a great summary; it's a great challenge. Leadership is not determined by your title or how much money you're making. It's by your followership. Are you really able to move the people around you in a specific direction of your choosing, and that it becomes their choosing also. So it's all about results. The biggest truism that came from me pretty early in my career was, you can have reasons and stories and excuses, or you can have results. You cannot have the two.
That's right.
You've got one or the other. And in terms of leading people, you have to look at how successful am I at sensing where they are so that I can lead them. So that's that push-pull of empathy and a strong ego. That it's the opposite of the so-called imposter syndrome.
Right.
It is that I'm here for a reason. I'm the perfect person for this job. Or if I'm not perfect, I'm on my way to that. And I need to pay attention to how to appeal to every person that I am challenged to lead. Because they're going to need, I'm going to have to know who they are, where they are, and how to best approach them if I'm going to be successful with them. So it's this interesting push-pull between ego and empathy. And it's all taking place on the battlefield, to use your metaphor. It isn't like you're able to be this contemplative monk sitting on a hillside, smoking dope.
Got to be in action.
You got to be in action. You got to handle the urgent to some degree. Right. But, my pitch is always what's important. Because ultimately, what's important is going to be the long-term success piece.
Yeah. So good. Okay. Wow. I want to give you a chance here. We're going to go to the speed round. I'm going to kind of fumble through a few questions here, but my question is always around a book recommendation. I want to hear about your book and maybe something else that maybe you'd recommend in addition to, but please tell us how to find your book. Give us the synopsis of it. What are we looking for? That type of thing.
Well, Living an Extraordinary Life is the title. Living an Extraordinary Life, and certainly available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those kinds of things. Available on Kindle. It's selling about 10 Kindles to one hard copy, I've noticed recently. The world is definitely changing. And but if you want a signed copy, go to my website, therobertwhite.com, therobertwhite.com. And you also have an opportunity to sign up for my weekly e-zine, which is called An Extraordinary Minute with Robert. And I take an idea that's kind of fascinating me that week and a few comments on it. It's all designed to be read in 1 minute or less. That's the pitch. And it's a way for us to stay in touch. Included with that is a 28-page summary of all I've learned about success. So, and that's free. It's shareable. A lot of people have used it like a book club, that little 28-pager with their team. But it gets us in relationship, and that's really what's important to me right now. The book that I recommend highly always is Man's Search for Meaning. The Viktor Frankl book, the story of what he learned from having a number on his arm, from the Holocaust. And it's like the Bible for the personal development industry from my point of view.
Wow.
There are a lot of other good books. My book is about some people complained about it. They said it's not about you, about Robert and his extraordinary life. No, it's not. It's the interaction between our material, what we've learned about the human condition and success, and real people and their reaction to it. So it's real people's stories about awareness, about personal responsibility, and about communication, about developing a mastery in communication. So it's when I wrote it, I avoided writing it for 20 years, Chaz. It's embarrassing.
It comes back to that avoidance.
Yes, and reasons, stories, and excuses. I had a few, as the song goes, and but a lot of people have felt it's valuable. People like Ken Blanchard, and Jimmy Colano, and people that are real winners in the personal and business development space have bought lots of copies for their friends, and that makes me feel really good to know I've contributed a bit. So I recommend the book. I recommend the free stuff. And on therobertwhite.com, there's a little button to click to get 30 minutes with me free. So those are all ways to kind of get to know what I'm up to and how I might be of service.
Absolutely. I want to ask you one more question before I get to my last one. And it's maybe more practical than we've been, but being an executive or an entrepreneur, we have mindset and we have tactics and all these things in between. And so tactically speaking, I want to we've talked a lot in theory and talked a lot in mindset, and I want you to take me into actually running a business. What do you believe is the most important KPI, or the one thing that you would be tracking if you could only pick one thing?
I think it's different for every business. I had 5. I ran a $45 million business, and I just watched 5 numbers, frankly. But I think it's, general systems theory is something I know just enough about to be really dangerous. But the general idea of it is that it's supposed to be the theory that explains everything.
Right. Yeah.
How's that for a claim?
Yeah.
And it is complex. And but what they basically posit is that everything is too complicated for the human mind to gather. You figure if you looked at world hunger, or you looked at manufacturing, or you look at politics or education, everything's too complicated. But that within all of that complication, there are leverage points where one unit of effort produces 10 units of results.
Right.
The classic thing about a lever: give me a lever, I can move the world. Right. And so I think the challenge for entrepreneurs is to look at what are and I chose 5, but I think 2 or 3 is even better. 2 or 3 things that I have to pay attention to. I have to wake up to them in the morning. I have to have them for lunch, and I have to review how we did on them for dinner. And I think it's different for every company. Certainly, cash flow is king. It's the oxygen of business. Yeah. It sounds kind of rude, but don't let your tax accountant or your lawyer run your company.
Yeah.
Don't make decisions out of that. Make decisions out of clients being happy and what your cash flow is, if you get right down to it.
Yep. Because
cash is oxygen. Without it, you don't live very long.
Yeah, so good. Okay, last question. Robert, if you could whisper in the younger Robert's ear, what would you say?
To deal with blame, shame, regret, and guilt earlier, and realize that I can't change my past, and that when I get that out of the way, when I tell the truth about my current reality, I can choose a future that goes way beyond what a lot of authority figures projected for me early on. That would be the big thing, is letting go of the past.
Well, as the listener today, if you haven't been inspired and challenged and given some insight, I don't know where you're going to find it. If you didn't find it here today, you weren't listening. You didn't pay attention. You need to go back and review it again. But in all seriousness, Robert, you've been incredible. We will put your information that you gave a few minutes ago regarding your website and the book, and they can get some time with you on your website, all that fun stuff. We'll put that in the show notes so they can easily connect with you. I highly recommend for any of our listeners who want to reach out that you take Robert up on his offer to connect and to begin the relationship, as he said. I think that so many of us young guys in business are learning that it's relationship and then the rest. And so you've displayed that here to us today, and so we just appreciate that, and we wish you nothing but success, blessing, your business, your family, everything that you touch your hand with. Thank you for being here, Robert.
Thank you, Chaz. It's been a wonderful experience in conversation with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Gathering the Kings. We hope you got a ton of value today and learned a thing or two about taking your business to 7 figures and beyond. If you desire more and want a community around you to help you get there, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. That's gatheringthekings.com. And I want you to apply for our next Becoming a King 90-day intensive. We are extremely exclusive by nature as a group. What that means is that we're really wanting only the entrepreneurs who take their business and targets super serious to apply. So if that's you, you think you got what it takes to level up your business, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com and apply. And we will see you on the other side.